So the first question that we actually received was, should you use pre-wet salt in snowy conditions? I'm going to pass over to Alan Sheen to answer that.
Okay, welcome everybody, and thanks for attending. I'll give a response, and probably also ask Paddy, who covered this in good detail in his presentation, to also chip in alongside me. It's kind of strange, really, that in the UK that we still kind of see pre-wet as a bit of a novelty. Looking back, it was over 20 years ago now that the initial pre-wet trials were carried out at the very start of what became the NWSRG. And it's been a technique that's been used particularly in continental Europe, but now worldwide, for 30 or 40 years. And the whole principle of it, as Paddy alluded to in his presentation, is to activate the salt, getting it in a form that it can act as an anti-icer or de-icer after the event, and also to enable the salt to be spread more consistently, more evenly, and stay in place to do its job. And as Paddy also touched upon, there are many different ways of doing it. The 3070 has been the accepted way for the national authorities across the UK for many years now. It has been adopted by many local authorities, but I would still say the majority are still relying on what's called dry salt treatment. And in order for dry salt to work, it has to form a brine. A solid salt particle is not a de-icer, has no impact at all. It has to form a brine, so it has to be crushed by traffic, increase the surface area, and absorb moisture from the atmosphere to work. And that applies whether you're looking at it as an anti-icer in marginal nights against frost, or you're looking, as you should be looking, for an effective anti-icer for snow conditions. In other words, to get a product down that's active and working, and in snow conditions, to prevent that snow forming a bond with the roadway. So it makes it easier for traffic to move the snow, or in heavier conditions, for ploughing to remove the snow and stop it bonding. Paddy, do you want to come in on this?
Sure. Yeah, thanks, Alan. I think from what I've seen out happens out there as well with snowy conditions, just to add on what Alan has said, I think a couple of key things to think about. First, it's as a pre-treatment, the pre-wet salt can help mitigate the impact of the snow by creating a bond on the surface of the road so it can be more easily ploughed. I think importantly as well, snow should be ploughed if it has lay, and that's not always the case as well. Sometimes authorities still go out with a 40-gram dry grit to attack snow. Really, the best practice would be to plough those. It sounds sort of commonplace. Sounds commonplace, but and I think it's important also to understand that the current research out there limits the sort of pre-wet salt to above temperatures of say -7 or thereabouts. Now that's obviously it's extreme conditions for it to go there. It's not always possible in that presentation to go into all the limitations and things, but I think the current research anyway states -7 is perhaps the most where pre-wet salt is less effective. But as for snowy conditions, yeah, they should be ploughed and then treated thereafter. Now, if this is recurring snow and coming down, I can see a desire to put down as much sodium chloride as possible, and as entering with the snow, it will combine to make a brine. But it should be ploughed first with pre-wet salt thereafter. There are other additives you can add to make a brine. Not just using sodium chloride brine as a 70-30. There's still research developing in that area as well, but there's no reason why these other additives could go in and be more effective in those snowy conditions as well. But as Alan said there, and what I've witnessed in other countries as well, in the alpine regions, they can use sometimes a 50-50 mix, and it's regular snowfall there as well, and they manage it quite well.
Okay, thanks, Alan. Thanks, Paddy. Does anybody have any further questions relating to this particular topic? Okay, if no further questions, the second question that we had was, what are the maintenance costs of saturators? So I'll kindly pass that one over to Paddy again.
Yeah, okay. So I think it depends very much so on the technology selection that you have. I'll speak for the saturators that we make. Are upflow saturators, so basically gravity's doing most of the work there, and the implication for that is that there is a lower maintenance cost when compared to downflow saturators, which use a gravel bed and whatnot. And some of the technologies that I've seen out there as well, you can, by its very definition, have a longer maintenance time on those. But I'll speak for the Peacock ones. We use a lot of technology used in continental Europe, where they've got, as we've kind of discussed as well, they use pre-wet salt more often than we do. So there's whole supply chains dedicated to things like salt brine pumps, specifically for use in winter maintenance, and that's the technology we put in. But by doing that, we can cut the maintenance costs down quite considerably. So as an illustration, we put a sort of 2 visits a year service charge around about the £1,000 per site fee, and that will go up and down depending on the age of it. But we can put in an up to a 5-year warranty as well if we are looking after that equipment quite intensively, and for some of our newer units. And by doing that, we can vouch for the system, and we can vouch for how it's looked after, and make sure there's less breakdowns. But more importantly as well, the maintenance costs are kept quite low. I think that's one of the issues in the UK with some of the technology that's out there for making brine. It's not always reliable, and so the technology choice and the maintenance costs have a big bearing on that.
Okay, thanks very much, Paddy. Does anybody else have any further questions regarding this? Or has Paddy covered everything there?
So succinctly, I think then.
We've not had any questions through, Mark.
Okay. Okay, the third question that we've had here is, how do you work with real-time friction monitoring? So I'll pick that up first, and then I'll just pass over to Alan Sheen. So ExactTrack currently is the UK distributor for the Tekna road condition monitor, the RCM 411, which is an optical sensor based on spectral analysis. The firmware of the software actually measures the optical reflection signals. And analysis the data produces the road surface condition and the friction report. So the actual sensor itself measures in real time the actual surface state, the water layer thickness, the coefficient of the friction itself, and the surface temperature. So the data that we actually collect is transmitted utilizing a mobile phone back to our web server, where individual journeys are stored, and the data can then be viewed against the map with various color themes. The data can also be exported as a CSV file for further analysis. So hopefully that covers that aspect. Alan, I don't know if you want to expand on that.
Yeah, no, it's an interesting question because what we seem to be looking at it's across winter maintenance across Europe is not the actual measurement of the friction in real time in winter conditions, but to look at as many aspects as we can possibly do to get a proxy for it, and in a lot of cases a pretty accurate proxy for it. I've had some discussions quite recently with suppliers of friction equipment that are used routinely in the summer for measuring the road condition, but they are deemed perhaps not to be suitable, particularly as you're adding moisture down with them, to wet the tyre for measuring in winter conditions. But the interesting thing is, my background many years back was on the airports, formulating and selling de-icers, where routinely every 20 minutes, half an hour, so a Saab friction tester would run down the runway and taxiways and actually measure what the true friction is, and to check the runway was still safe for use. From what I'm picking up, don't believe that is a practical or feasible thing to do on the roads, and I think all the effort needs to go into looking at the use of sensors like the Techno device that Mark is talking about. And there are trials now coming together in the UK, particularly one between East Riding of Yorkshire and Highways England, where they're looking at a number of devices, looking at all aspects of temperature, road condition, water film thickness, of the rest of it, to get a much more accurate picture on what's going on. One of the key aspects of that, I believe, as well, is to get a proper measure of residual salinity on the road surface, which in combination with the water film thickness can give you a very accurate idea of is sufficient salt available. Now, at the very early days of trying, a couple of devices being used to do measurements. A trial run has been done in East Yorkshire with some interesting results, and I think it's going to be interesting to see, perhaps at their sort of mid-season review, end of January, how that's all starting to tie together with a number of ways of taking a view on what the true condition of the road surface is.
Okay, thanks very much, Alan. I'm not sure if anybody else has got any questions, wanted to bring up anything on this. Everybody's been a little quiet today.
Mark, I just would say that Alan makes that, the good point about residual salt, and the value of that residual salt, and it's always been the bugbear of a number of claims that have come in is knowing what was that residual salt level and having an assurance that resalting or re-application is done at the appropriate time. We get the problem that some authorities, some of the national authorities, are taking, a very risk conscious decision to go out quite regularly, where others are making decisions on going out on a 12-hour cycle. And no one really knows what that residual salt value is. And until we can establish some scientific evidence that supports that, it's going to be very difficult when the real time tells you that there's an issue there, and you really assumed it was going to be okay. So it's an important piece of work, but it needs to be looked at in the round, in the sense of saying, well, how often do I have to reapply? Is a 12-hour turnaround sufficient? Is it an 8-hour? Is it a 6-hour? What level of residual salt am I looking for? What is an effective level of residual salt? Because some of the information room suggests that we're well above that level when we're normally pre-salting. So it's interesting, but I think we've got to be careful how we use it. But let's try and use it as a positive rather than a negative, because I think it could be something that could certainly bite us quite badly if we don't get this particular piece of information right.
Yeah, thanks very much, Richard. You picked up on some very good points there. And I think, it's early stages with this data. We just need to review the findings that we're getting, and obviously continue it through the trials that Alan's referencing through this coming winter as well.
Because I always, sorry, Mark, just to go back, if you know that there's that there is a particular issue there, how quickly should you respond? Can you respond? And what are the effects of traffic on that particular network over a period of time? How is that going to come in? If you catch it at, say, 2 in the morning and there's indicating some issues, well, actually, if you've salted at 12 o'clock, how do you actually know that the salt hasn't been effectively converted to a pre-treatment at that particular point? We need a lot of research in this, but I'll be very careful that we don't jump into having information that's going to come and bite us in the back.
Yeah, no, definitely. Yeah, as I said, Richard, some great points there. Okay, anybody else have any further comments, questions? Jim, I presume you've had no other further questions through on the chat?
No questions through, no.
Okay, so we'll just move on to the next question, which was how can an authority find the most up-to-date guidance documents? So Richard, I'll pass that one over to you.
Yeah, I mean, the NWSRG website, it has all of those documents available, as does the IHE's website. So you can go to either of those and pick up, download copies free of charge. They're in, as I said in my presentation, they're in sections now. Still, all the advice that was previously supplied is also there, particularly in NWSRG. And it's a matter of implementing those particular guidance documents into your policy. Changes are not significant from the previous Appendix H, but my, they are easier to read than Appendix H was. And I think certainly those who started to put those things together have done a fantastic job, because certainly my editing of those processes has been a lot easier than I anticipated. I thought I was going to have to have a lot of science and technology and all sorts of numbers and things, but we've stripped that out and put those into appendices, and the boffins and those who are interested can read them at their own leisure. But certainly the documents now are, I think, easy to read, easy to follow, and hopefully get some confidence that this is the best practice and we should follow it as much as we possibly can.
Okay, thanks very much, Richard. Do any of our guests have any further questions at all? Any comments to make on this?
You think it's possible, I don't know if we can do this with audience engagement online, but do you think it's possible to have a show of hands, perhaps with people that have been onto the website and the NWSRG website and looked at the guidance?
I don't think we can do that, although
All right.
we could at the end, Paddy, if everyone puts their cameras on, we could do an actual video.
I see.
I think that's a good point, though, Paddy, because certainly
Got one thumbs up.
Little publicity from the NWSRG. I know that I've certainly tried through the Institute to try and put this forward, but it's, you know, it's quite limited. They've come out in dribs and drabs over the years. So, you know, obviously events like this are a good opportunity to get this thing out there. But, you know, there are only 3 more to do, one of which is a preface, and hopefully the condition, the work on footways and cycleways can be out fairly soon. That's probably 2021, probably the most critical piece of guidance to get out there, because there really wasn't a great deal prior to the new document. So, yeah, I send you the links if you need to do it that way. We can put it on the web, but just please use them and get access to them. They're nice and chunky to read.
Thanks, Richard. I'm sure we can circulate the links to the web portals after that to everybody that's joined in here.
Just before we move on, Mark, we've had a question in from Sean Wilson. He's asking, do you think untreated dry salt is here to stay, or do you think there will be a move to treated products in the future?
Alan, do you want to pick that one up, or Paddy?
Yeah, I'm happy to. I think to between us, yeah. It's an interesting one. I mean, when you start to look at the research and go into the detail of what NWSRG have done in their scientific tests, and you see worldwide, and look at what is being achieved now with high rates of pre-wet or brine-only treatments. In reality, you don't need a huge amount of salt to actually be on the carriageway to be effective, but you are taking risks. So yes, dry salt without treatment, without pre-wet, and that, you know, it's tried and tested for, what are we looking at now? Some probably 50, 60, 70 years in the UK. But that's not to say it's the most effective way of doing it, but it is the cheapest way of doing it, you know, without having to invest in equipment or invest in additives. It can do it, and I can understand why we have stuck in the UK. So, you know, a high proportion in the UK is still using dry salt only because of its simplicity. But when you start to see the sort of numbers, you know, that Paddy has discussed, and you start to see, you know, how accurate spreading, and, you know, can start to make significant 20-30% savings in the amount of salt actually being spread, I think we do, as a winter service community, need to test ourselves a bit, perhaps, and challenge some of the traditional ways of doing things. I think there's a place for all of these techniques. You have an issue with certain of the treated salts that you're putting a chemical oxygen demand and biological oxygen demand into the environment that you don't have there with salt. But it is easier to buy a one-stop product. But you have all sorts of problems in how you store it, you know, and various other factors around that. So I'd say, yeah, dry salting is probably here to stay, but that's not because it's the best way of doing it. Paddy, do you want to?
Yeah, I'll come in. I think there was a question there from Rob as well regarding treated salt, so we can kind of touch on both points. Now, Peacock have a range of, you know, we have a range of salts, including those that are treated as well, and we see them used in specific applications where you're wanting maybe to have a low corrosive product on, say, railways or lines or whatever else. And some, as Alan mentioned there, there's some that have a low chemical oxygen demand as well, more environmentally friendly. So they do have their place. I think again, it's touched on in the guidance documents, but I think from experience as well, you can see the larger authorities that use it, some of the county councils and highway authorities that use pre-wetted salt do so because mainly because some of the savings can be made en masse, and it's effective, the quality benefits there. So when you look at the areas in which treated salt is used, again, they're there for a specific reason. Perhaps people don't want to make that further commitment, or maybe are unsure, but I think as more and more people start to use it, the momentum builds and it no longer becomes a novelty. But yeah, every it's got its place out there in specific applications.
Thanks, Alan. Thanks, Paddy. Sean, has that answered your question?
Yes, it does. Thank you, Mark.
Okay, perfect. Thank you. Okay, any other comments, questions in relating to that question?
I just would sort of make a comment that don't overcomplicate it by looking for complex chemical activity. But then again, mined rock salt is a crude material, dirty. It has environmental issues as well. So moving up the sort of complexity line, you know, we need to be getting away from that very base material. But the other end of the market, we may overcomplicate this issue. I'm sure in severe weather situations, it won't matter what the hell we put down. We've got to get you know, roads open and clear. It's going to be there for a long time. But I think we just got to try and refine our processes over a long period and just try and get to a more appropriate solution. Sorry, use the word solution wrongly there. I don't mean in solution. I mean appropriate answer to how we deal with this issue. If in doubt, you know, get them out, get lots of salt on the road. It looks effective. In fact, it's probably not the best way to treat the network, but unless the evidence supports the change, then you're going to be stuck with lots of people. You know, with my own self in a sort of dinosaur role. Well, just put some pure rock salt on. Let's just get rid of it. That'll solve the problem. Get rid of the technology. Do something very basic. I'm not sure that attitude that perhaps prevailed 25, 30 years ago is right now. We need to be developing better solutions, more environmentally friendly, more appropriate for the active travel that we're promoting as well, and think those sort of situations. So it has its role, but I think it's hopefully going to diminish, a bit like the petrol engine. A few years' time, we'll not see very much of it.
Yeah, no, thanks very much, Richard. I think, you know, as you've just touched on there, it's a matter of making sure that we actually control the amount of salt, brine, pre-wet, whichever solution that we're actually putting out on that network. It's just making sure that we do control it properly. Okay, thanks very much. So if nobody's got any further comments on that particular one there, the last question that we've actually had in which is where are routes stored and archived in MapRoute, and can they be stored locally? So I'll pick this one up. Obviously, the routes that our users create in MapRoute are securely stored on our hosted servers, which is within the Azure platform. We also have a full route audit trail. So every time anybody goes in to create a new route, amend an existing route, we actually manage to secure the data of who's done that, the date it was changed, amended, and it's obviously all time stamped, and that is all in a route log, so anybody can actually go and see that. All the routes also can be downloaded in a shapefile format and stored locally. As part of the package, the user can actually create their own route cards. Those route cards can be printed in a PDF format or also exported in a CSV file. So the user has total control of recording and keeping their own routes, but obviously we maintain the whole site and record all of the routes, and they're also stored secondly in a secondary location. So should there be any issues, we've got all that data secure. So hopefully that clarifies that particular question. I'm not sure if anybody else has got any further queries, comments to make against that particular one. Okay, well, those are all the questions that we've actually had prior to the event, or the couple that Gemma's picked up during the event as well. So basically, it's handing over to anybody else that wants to throw any questions to the panel that we've got here today. If you can, please just raise your hand and Gemma will pull you through.
There is a question just popped in from Rob Knight on the chat.
I think we touched on that when he was answering a previous question, but if
yeah, okay.
Again, then.
Yeah, no, I just kind of thought we'd probably pick that up in the question about dry salt earlier. I think, as Paddy said at the end of that discussion, there's a place for all sorts of products and alternative products. I think it's just picking the right one for the right place. You certainly wouldn't want to be using a product like EcoThor or SafeCoat, you know, if you were close to waterways or whatever. You immediately, you know, you've got issues there with biological oxygen demand and COD and and whatever. But I think everything has a time and has a place. And I think, as Richard said, I think the industry has made massive steps forward in the last 10 years or so, and you see a real diversity now in terms of where the national authorities are in terms of how they store and spread and use and what type of salt, compared with, I have to say, a large number of local authorities that really haven't changed, you know, a great deal over that time, and there's good reason for that in terms of cost pressures and difficulties adopting certain technologies. But I think, as Richard says, you know, I think times will change, and there is a place for all of these different products, but used in the right way, stored in the right way, spread in the right way, and used in the right environment. Does that help, Rob?
Evan.
I'm not sure. Thanks, Alan. I think that's hopefully clarified it there. Obviously, this is, you know, our first digital event. Hopefully, everybody's found it useful this morning from all the topics that have been covered. There's obviously further events going on during the week. We've got roundtable events hosted by Alan tomorrow and one on Thursday with Gregory. So, you know, how's it gone? Can we get any feedback from you know, the people that are online at the moment? Has it been valuable this morning? Have you learned things? Is there any further questions to anybody else in the panel here?
Thumbs up.
Thumbs up.
That'll do me. Good stuff.
Okay, thanks very much for the hands up feedback that we've got there. You know, last chance here. Does anybody that, you know, I mean, we've obviously covered quite a lot this morning. Some great questions that have come through. Has anybody got any further questions that they want to throw at the panel at all?
No, just some feedback. It's been a good session. This morning was really informative as well. So yeah, really helpful. Thanks very much.
Thanks very much, Mark. Thanks, Peter, as well. You know, we're obviously difficult times for everybody with not many events being held. So obviously we're trying to do these digital forums. You know, if this does work and is benefits, then, you know, we'll look to do further events later in the year and beginning of next year. Gemma, anything else that you wanted to pick up? Anything else that's come through?
Nothing from me. No questions that have come through either.
Okay. The rest of the panel, anybody else want to make any further comments?
No, just think Gemma's done a cracking job. That's all. We've got to say that.
Thanks, you.
Gemma.
Yeah, well done, Gemma. Great work all through. Okay, well, if we've got no more questions, then thanks everybody, you know, for attending. Thanks very much for the panel that have obviously presented this morning and, you know, answered all your questions. And we look forward to catching up with you later in the week.
Yep. Cheers, Mark.
Thanks very much.